Good morning, everyone, and welcome to IBMF's VetNet webinars. My name is Adhd, and today we are bringing you a live sneak peek stream from Veteran Edge, or one of the biggest, veteran conferences out there. We have over 400 organizations, entrepreneurs, and veterans gathered there at Dallas, Texas. As you can see, we are about to start this session on the state of veteran entrepreneurship, and we'll start very shortly here. Just to let you guys know, this is being recorded. This session, all of you should be on mute. I'll end the recording as soon as the session is over. And if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box, and I'll make sure to pass it along. Just to let you know, I will be sending out this PowerPoint presentation in the follow-up survey email once the session is over. So don't worry about it if you cannot see the presentation. Thank you.
So welcome, good morning. There you go. My name is Mike Haney. I am the director of the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, an entrepreneurship professor by faculty appointment at Syracuse University. I'm also the vice chancellor at SU. I know many of you. It's great to see faces again. It's great to be back and actually engaging in human ways with people instead of behind a screen. So what we're going to do this morning is something that we've done now for the past couple of years at Edge. That first year we did this, we weren't sure if it was going to fly. The three of us up here, and I'm going to introduce my colleagues here in a second. Our vocation, if you will, as academics, is to study entrepreneurship, study how it is that entrepreneurs do what they do in academic ways. And one of the things that we realized could be useful in the context of the larger aspiration and goals and objectives of Edge was to create some space in the program for us to talk and for a group of entrepreneurship academics to talk about some of the things that we see as a consequence of our research and broadly across the academic domain of entrepreneurship that could be both interesting but also practically relevant to all of you in the context of your pursuit of venture creation and venture growth over time. So what we're going to do this morning is each of us are going to talk for a little bit about a topic in the context of our academic lens on entrepreneurship that we think is interesting and relevant. You might now, you hear how I phrase that we think is interesting and relevant. That is not the same thing as saying that you're going to find it interesting and relevant, but you came through the door and you're sitting in a chair, so you're going to have to bear with us one way or the other. But the idea here is just to share a nugget or two and frame it in a way that could be practical, again, as a consequence of what we see that may impact you in practical ways or create opportunities for you in the context of some of the academic discovery, if you will. So with that as context and backdrop, I'm gonna introduce my colleagues very briefly and caveat this by saying that my introduction of them might not be how they want to be introduced. So I give them the space to add when it's their turn. But John Torrance, sitting here directly next to me, is an entrepreneurship professor also at Syracuse University. John, every day though, wears two hats. He is a very successful practicing entrepreneur over many years. We were just talking about the fact that I recruited him back in 2009 to start teaching in the midst of running several successful businesses, and I think John has really carved out some interesting niches in the context of the work that he does, and I think you'll hear one of those niches today. And then Dr. Chuck Miernick's down there at the end. Chuck and I also go way back. Chuck's a former Air Force officer like me, Chuck and I first met at teaching at the Air Force Academy. I like to say Chuck just sort of followed me. No. Like me, Chuck had the opportunity that the Air Force sent him off to earn a PhD in entrepreneurship and business strategy. And like me, Chuck then left the Air Force with that PhD and was a professor at Oregon State University, and then recently made a move that I'll let him talk to you about when it's up. But each of us we're gonna talk for 15 minutes or so is all. A couple slides we'll go through, and then we're gonna stop and offer all of you the opportunity to ask any questions and have a discussion about some of the things that we talked about. Is that reasonable? Everybody understand the agenda? So here we go, and I'm going to go first. I'm going to be pretty brief, and the thing I got to set up what I'm going to talk about. Oh, look, there's an agenda slide. Way to go, team. That's impressive. Going to skip right past it. I'm for many, many years, and I don't know if my friend Randy Blass is in this room anywhere. Are you here? He's way in the back. So Randy, also former Air Force officer, professor at Florida State University, also taught with Chuck and I at the Air Force Academy. Randy's an HR guy, and for many, many years, I mean, literally for a decade, I love to pick on HR people, and because I truly believe that if we could figure out a way for people to all of a sudden not be part of the business equation, everything would be very, very easier every single day. But the reality is I'm actually going to talk about an HR topic in terms of the thing that I see right now that to me is fascinating and potentially a game changer in the context of the world of business, if you will. And it came to me as a consequence of really a role that I had for my university over the past 16 months related to the pandemic and managing my particular employer's response to the pandemic over the past 16 months. And the thing I'm going to talk about has a name now. It's called the Great Resignation. And many of you may have been impacted or continue to be impacted by this, but to me, it is absolutely fascinating that over so far in 2021, more than 10 million people have walked away from their jobs. If you look at those statistics, two national polls that were recently done, one by Moody's and the other by Monster, 41% of the global workforce reports that they're considering leaving their job within the next year. 95% contemplating a job change. The segment, if you will, of the workforce that has been driving this trend in terms of walking away from their jobs and their careers are actually not the folks towards the end of their career, not the folks just entering the workforce out of college. It's the core middle. It's that experienced talent that's been in the workforce for 10, 15 years out of high school or college. They are the ones walking away in the greatest numbers. And we are in a situation today where there are more unfilled jobs in this country than there are unemployed Americans. It is not uncommon, to see car washes offering $20 an hour for folks to be able to bring folks to work. And this is and what's important about this is unprecedented in US history, even in the context of the Great Recessions and periods of pre and post war going all the way back to World War I. This is something different than we've ever experienced in this country in the past. And researchers are beginning to look at the why. Why is this happening? And a lot of that why goes back to the shared experience that we have had over the course of the past 16, 17 months and the COVID pandemic. And really what it amounts to is that pandemic experience for many Americans has fundamentally changed what matters. It changes how they prioritize what's important in their lives. This idea of purpose and meaning in work has taken on a new significance, but then also the recognition that in the context of work, flexibility, things like family, how we balance work and family life, feeling valued and being employed by a company that expresses in how they do business and in leadership the values that are common with their employers. All of these things. There was a group of researchers at Harvard just published results of a study. They did 9,000, good sample. I mean, certainly not 10 million, but 9,000 folks who have quit their jobs in 2021. And when those folks were asked why it is that they quit, I think number 6 on the list was compensation. Number 6. All this other stuff was listed before wages. Again, very fundamental shift and transformation from what was the norm, the status quo, in terms of the relationship between workers and their employer. Why do you care? As entrepreneurs, what the practical implications of this? One, if you are an employer, this is going to be expensive. I gave you an example, no kidding, real example, Central New York, driving home, drive past a car wash, big car wash, and right in downtown Syracuse, it's $20 an hour for somebody to work at a car wash. The cost of labor is going to increase. Implications for culture. When people start quitting because they decide that they just don't want to work for you, they just don't want to work for this company anymore, and they talk about reasons being the values of the company are not aligned with mine, reasons being I don't feel value, I don't feel appreciated, I don't feel heard. That has implications for your culture with regard to those who stay. People start questioning whether or not it's the starts with a drip and then you open the faucet, if you will, because people start asking the same questions that may have motivated that first or that second individual to leave. And here's the last thing that I think for me is going to be very, very interesting to watch over the next 12 to 24 months. I truly believe that the status quo approach to HR will fail you in the context of addressing this particular challenge. Because I don't believe it is a challenge that you can hire yourself out of. I don't believe it is a challenge that you can throw, sort of the normal HR tools and strategies out with regard to, because it really is, it's a hiring challenge. It's also a retention challenge and a culture challenge, all wrapped up together. And my last slide, what you can do. So let me share with you some of what has come out of the very beginnings. And this is, when I say very beginnings, folks that do the kinds of things that we do are just beginning to study this now and collect data and try to understand it. But I will tell you some of what those experts and folks looking at this are suggesting as practical strategy here. One, really start with data and take the time to understand your workforce, what matters to them, what doesn't matter to them. Think about, there was a passage in one of these studies that I read that 10 years ago it was all the rage for folks to put free food and lunch stations and all that kind of stuff. Many employees have sort of rejected that, if you will, that sort of self-focused, arguably indulgent kind of approach to feeling valued. Now it's a very different thing. They want to understand that they have a voice in terms of the company. But all of this gets to the second thing, this root causes. So if you have people leaving, why is it that they're leaving? Understanding the root causes of why folks are deciding to exit, but then also on the hiring side, what are the barriers to bringing on new talent? It's a very worthwhile exercise. For example, if you are in the market for talent and folks make different choices, the extent to which you can understand why they made a different choice, invaluable information to you, trying to understand that. And then given 1 and 2, the argument is you have to develop a new strategy, a new way to think about how you manage human capital in the context of your business, a hiring strategy, a retention strategy, more than all that, a strategy about how it is that you create empathy, which leads me to the next, into my final little word. What we're going through now, the Great Resignation, coupled with this, this unemployment that is not driven by lack of jobs, but driven by lack of choice and purpose and meaning. All this is going to challenge leaders in a new way. And this, arguably for me, is the most interesting part of all of this. The idea that you have to get to know for this, if you're going to respond to, going backwards, if you're going to respond to all this, purpose, meaning, flexibility, family, all of these things folks are saying now matter, the only way you respond to that is by leading differently, leading with empathy, getting to know who your employees are, not assuming that you've walked in their shoes, and building a strategy around recruitment, retention, that is really focused on conferring through work, through community and connectedness within your organization, purpose and meaning to your employees, because that's what they're saying they're looking for. That's why folks are walking away. That's also why folks are not taking just the next job for a paycheck. They're looking for purpose and meaning. This will unfold, over the course of the next, I think, 12 to 24 months. But I don't believe what we're seeing today, this fundamental shift in the relationship between work and the employer. I don't think this is a trend that, meaning that it is going to, we're going to go back to the status quo at some point. I think what this and generations to come, I work with 18 to 22-year-olds every single day, and I'll tell you, they don't talk about a paycheck like they used to. They talk about making decisions about where they're going to go to work as a function of, purpose, meaning, values, what matters to them. They want to feel part of something bigger. They want to feel connected. And that's a very different thing. And I think it's here to stay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
All right, good morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the link between ADHD and entrepreneurship. So first, how many people here have ADHD or think you do?
That's a HIPAA violation. You're not technically allowed to ask them that question. Yeah.
He should be raising his hand too, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. How many people have been told they have ADHD or just think they have it? Okay. Yeah. It's very common. Okay. So you're in good company if you either have a formal diagnosis or you just think you are, or your spouse, significant other, key partner, or whatever has told you you have it. These are just a few examples of people who have ADHD and have done quite well for it. And if you read any interviews or you read anything about them, they often attribute their raging ADHD to their success. But it comes with a downside. Okay, these things are very common among people with ADHD. And you may be looking up there and
why are people laughing? That's not a good list. I mean,
it can be very dysfunctional. I mean, it is classified as a disability, right? It's classified in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as a disability. If you have these traits, a doctor can diagnose you with ADHD and you can be prescribed medicine and that sort of thing. So no doubt it can be highly disabling, and I don't mean to belittle any of that or make light of it. However, what's functional or dysfunctional depends on context, right? So here's 7'6" Yao Ming. And when Yao Ming needs to sit in a chair that normal humans need to sit in for 6 to 7 hours, it's a pretty dysfunctional situation for Yao Ming, right? On the other hand, when he's got to walk through pedestrian traffic, or if he's at a festival and he needs to look out among the crowd, his 7 feet or 6 inches of height is highly functional. And I say that because it's very similar with ADHD being dysfunctional in some contexts and highly functional in others. And the lucky thing for us is that in the context of entrepreneurship, ADHD is highly functional for a few reasons. Now, I should say that there's two basic types of ADHD, or two presentations of it. One is the inattentive type, where these are the people who look like they're the absent-minded professor. They're losing their keys all the time. They look lazy. They don't care. But then there's the hyperactive impulsive type. These are the people that are always going, they talk really fast, they're impulsive, they're sensation seeking. It's that type that correlates more highly with entrepreneurial success. And it's not to say that you can't be successful if you have inattentive type, it's just that you have more of an uphill battle and things that you have to manage. So highly functional if you're Yao Ming in a crowd, highly dysfunctional if you have to sit in a normal chair for several hours. Likewise, with entrepreneurs, it's highly functional in some contexts with ADHD. So the reason I'm interested in this is like Mike said, I've been a business owner most of my adult life. And in the early stages of entrepreneurship, all the things that entrepreneurs need to do are very well suited to somebody with hyperactive ADHD. Right? You've got to hustle and flow. You've got to hire people, do contracts. You've got to all sorts of things that work really well for people with ADHD. Although as you kind of grow in your company and your company requires different things of you, it starts to push our boundaries a little bit. So if you have ADHD and you're really good at the initial phases, assembling resources, you're really good at improvisation, things like that, it's great in early stages, but as you get deeper into the company's life cycle, for example, when it requires coherent planning of resources, policies and procedures, things like that, that's where the wheels might fall off the bus for those of us with ADHD. And as a matter of fact, we find that sometimes we become serial entrepreneurs because we just kind of max out and we're like, I'm done with this, I got to move on to the next thing. I noticed it because my employees were having a really hard time with me and the way I functioned and the way I worked. So at Syracuse University, like Mike said, I've been doing this since 2009. It's the only real job I've ever held. Otherwise, it's always been jobs that I've created or companies that I've owned or started. So there are so one of the things I was looking at was this peer group that I'm a part of. I was meeting a lot of these people, getting to know them. And I was just I'm like, yeah, this person's got ADHD, that person does, And I got diagnosed well into my career because people were having trouble dealing with me, right? We would spend all day in a strategic planning meeting. We'd set our direction. We'd be like, okay, good, this is what we're doing. And then the very next day, I'd get a really good idea that maybe it was 180 degrees different from what we had just spent all day planning. And I would just casually talk to people about it. But then all of a sudden it became—
their brains would explode.
They would explode. They were like, were you not here? Were we not in the same room yesterday? What are you talking about? Who's going to do it? How are we going to resource it? Everybody would go. And I was thinking, I'm just talking out loud, which I realized was sometimes not productive, right? So my office is next door to a colleague. His name's Johan Wickland. And Johan studies this, and I just talked to him about it casually, and he's like, "Hey, we should study this population because these were all entrepreneurs who had achieved at least 13 million in revenue, had 50 employees or more, So they were successful examples. So we just did a survey and we wanted to see is this hypothesis correct? Is there a lot of ADHD among a group of successful entrepreneurs? So I just want to share some of the data that we got. So along the bottom, you can see a lot of these classic traits of hyperactive ADHD, right? Sense of urgency, lack of premeditation or not overthinking things, lack of perseverance, so on and on. And you can see in people with ADHD in the black versus the orange. And across the board, there were higher scores for those who identified with ADHD. Now, we didn't ask them if they had a diagnosis. What we did was we gave them an ADHD self-reporting scale to complete, which is something used by the World Health Organization, and you answer a bunch of questions, and it tells you whether or not you have traits consistent with the diagnosis. So this is just some general data we found. The other thing we noticed, because we asked them a bunch of questions, so we really wanted to figure out what was this like for entrepreneurs with ADHD. More of them started their own companies, but then among the other ones, few of them inherited it, right? So few of them took over family business, fewer of them bought their companies, and fewer of them were hired guns. Most of them had started their own companies. Now, revenue size, this was kind of interesting. Even though they had some really interesting metrics, it was those without ADHD that were managing much larger companies. So those with ADHD had a lot of interesting things going for them. They tended to have more innovative cultures and that sort of thing, but their companies weren't quite as big. But they did experience better growth, much higher rates of growth among their employees and their sales. So their trajectories and their velocity were much, much higher. And that makes sense, right? If you're hyperactive and you have a sense of urgency and you've got ants in your pants and you're always going, it would make sense that you're adding sales and that your employees are growing, right? But again, the other side of that, it comes with a cost. If your organization can't handle that type of growth that you might be comfortable with personally, that's going to cause problems. And the reason that's important to you is because if you identify with these traits, or maybe you've even seen some of this play out in your own organizations, you're going to need to learn how to manage that and help other people's experience of you so that you can get the most out of them for your organization. So why so much ADHD among entrepreneurs, right? So it's interesting that we did this study and we found out that, yeah, of course, it kind of supported the hypothesis, but why is it, right? Why is this link so prevalent? We know that entrepreneurship, it's high, irreducible uncertainty, right? All of you have lived that, you know it, it's just something that you can't get away from. High uncertainty works really well for people with ADHD. So rational people, and I say rational jokingly, like, people, maybe without ADHD, they're anxious about maybe, getting into a new line of business, launching a new product. They wait, they collect information, they analyze until they're 100% sure in their minds that this is going to work. For the rest of us with ADHD, we're maybe more impulsive and we just charge ahead. We're like, yep, we think that's a great idea. We're going for it, right? Oh, sorry about the animation. I should have taken those out. So high uncertainty renders this analytical approach unsuitable, really, right? So in an analytical approach, you analyze all the data, you come to a decision, and then you act and you follow that plan. That doesn't really work so much in an area or an environment with high uncertainty, such as entrepreneurship. And as a matter of fact, it works really well for those of us with ADHD. So we can act, then evaluate the results of our actions, then revise what we're doing, and then act again and go through this loop. And it sounds somewhat dysfunctional when you compare it to this analytical approach. But in the real world, in reality, in these startup companies, it's highly functional. And you could draw a line between this and the lean startup methodology and that sort of thing, where you're constantly testing your value hypothesis, right? I mean, we don't teach entrepreneurs to analyze, do the business plan, and then run out and start the company without ever having tested their hypothesis in the first place, multiple times. So this kind of loop works really well for entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurial action under uncertainty. So we've got this action orientation for impulsive people, right? So if you're impulsive, you know what I'm talking about. You've got to be doing something. If you're not doing something, you're driving yourself crazy, you're driving people around you crazy, your employees crazy. You've got to be pursuing some sort of something fun and interesting, right? And it's an inherent fit between entrepreneurship and ADHD. So the lived experience of having ADHD, one of the reasons why there could be so much in this field or in this population is we're used to working hard for things that others take for granted. So if you've got ADHD, you probably have had experiences in public school or formal education where things just came harder for you, right? Maybe it was impossible for you to study, or maybe you didn't read well by learning, whatever it was, right? But you had this tenacity and discipline and creativity, and you figured out how to do what you needed to do despite what's otherwise called a disabling condition. There's few other career options, right? I mean, I know a lot of good friends who went to graduate school, got amazing jobs, and that was just never going to be my path because I wasn't that guy, right? I wasn't joining the credentials arms race. I wasn't worried about all this kind of thing because I was more interested in other things, right? So this, dedication and don't give up when things get tough, we know that. We deal with that all the time. And then we're used to failing. So failure is a part of entrepreneurship. And we have this, anyway, it's just part of the deal, right? So if you're used to that, you've got this resilience that is very common among entrepreneurs. And resilience also is common among those with ADHD for all the reasons I just mentioned. And then my last one there is, I can't read. Oh, you're used to getting help from others. So this idea of networking and knowing who to go to for what, or, I got a guy type of, person, right? I got a guy for this, I got a guy for that, or I know a guy, right? This is kind of this networking in action. So 3 connections between ADHD and entrepreneurship. One is that we're outliers, right? Entrepreneurs by definition are outliers because not many people choose that path for a lot of good reasons. So outliers in general are attracted to entrepreneurship. This impulsivity, right? The hyperactive impulsive presentation of ADHD is really well suited. And it's, again, this ability to make quick decisions without a lot of information, the ability to thrive in chaos and uncertainty and be okay with it, actually better than okay. You actually prefer it in a lot of circumstances. That's another connection. And then it's just this lived experience. You've lived your life in certain ways that uniquely suit you to entrepreneurship. And you could draw a lot of parallels between being a service member and having entrepreneurship, just, in terms of these connections, right? There's a lot of analogies there. So these are the 3 ways that it connects. And then there's this, so what I did was I kind of took the traits, and there's a really interesting article that goes through the yin and yang of ADHD and entrepreneurship, but the traits are listed in the middle, and you can see what it looks like when those traits are helping you. And then you can also see what it looks like when they're harmful. And it's important to recognize that if you experience ADHD or the traits of ADHD, you're going to live these often in the same moment. Okay. And it's also important for you to know when these are being activated so you can manage the downsides so that the upsides can flourish. Because entrepreneurs with ADHD can have a huge advantage. You can use these traits to your advantage to do things that other people can't do, but you're also going to have to focus on getting out of your own way. And so just for example, this high propensity for risk, right? We always associate risk taking with entrepreneurship. And in fact, it's really risk mitigating, right? We're okay with the risk we're taking. We're not taking wild risks, but when it looks functional or it's helpful, you are the brave and visionary leader who took the leap where others were too scared to do it. But if it's dysfunctional, it just looks like you're reckless and crazy and you don't think things through before you act, right? So each one of these traits has an upside and a downside. So one other one that I want to mention real quick is this, this proactive nature of being an entrepreneur with ADHD. We're highly proactive, right? We got to do something before our competition does or before the opportunity disappears. So one quick example that I lived personally. So I would get home and I'd have an idea and I'd email my key people, say, hey, this is something I want to talk about. I'd maybe add some extra information. But I didn't realize it was 5 o'clock on a Friday, right? Because I wasn't looking at the clock. I was just, it was in my head and I had to get it out. So now one of my employees who I would really love to go home and have a good weekend, now they just got an email from me of something that I think is super important that we got to talk about. I just ruined their weekend because even I said, hey, it's not urgent, but they don't hear that. They just heard that the CEO said, hey, we got to deal with this. Now this is what they're dealing with, right? So one small thing that I've learned how to do is temper that. That's why they quit. That's why we're dealing with the mass resignation. Actually, if you experience these traits and you're kind of leaning more towards the harmful or dysfunctional side, this might be, this might be a really good time to manage those things, because, when you amplify that with the Great Resignation, you can see that there's possibly more room for trouble there. So I'll leave this slide. So now, yeah, it's interesting, that entrepreneurs have ADHD, but what we can do about it, we'll get to that maybe during the Q&A or something. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A. And I also want to hand it off to my colleague, Chuck, here. So let me just get to his slides. There we go.
It's okay. Your stuff's more interesting. Just stick with that. Can I stand? Is that all right?
You can do whatever you want.
All right. If I want to mess up, I'm small. So yeah, that's what Mike. So Chuck Murnick, I never sit or stand behind the podium when I'm teaching, so I can't do it now. Former Air Force officer, civil engineer. I got any civil engineers? Anyone, or CBs, or what's the 21 Delta, or I forget what I got one. All right. Woo! Combat engineer. Oh, there we go. Army. Yeah, no, fantastic. I just forget the code. You guys have a lot more codes than we do. So what Mike said earlier, so I started my career, did a lot of it in civil engineering and whatnot. And one of the things that kind of bugged me about being in that field, loved it, really important function, but it was, we're in the support group, which means we're a support function. And what I liked about going back to teaching when I did that is, at least at the Air Force Academy, I felt like I was back, like I was on the tip of the spear, right? We're on the function that delivers the mission. And so anyway, like Mike said, I followed his coattails. I rode them for as long as I could. I'm still doing that. And then when Mike went to get a PhD, he said, Chuck, it's great. You should think about this. I came up there, I said, okay, I'm gonna study marketing. And Mike said, no, you should study entrepreneurship. And I was like, really? I really like marketing. That's what I think I'm gonna like. He said, no, you should do this. I did, and he was right. And honestly, it's because you all are the tip of the spear. I mean, when we look at research, or where creativity, like where's creativity come from? Where's innovation come from? Where do those things, because we're trying to teach that at universities, right? We're trying to teach people how to be more of this. Where we look to develop that is entrepreneurship in large part. You guys are the tip of the spear. That's why I love this field. It's fascinating. It's great. Everything about it. It's wonderful. So this is actually a project that Mike and I actually both worked on. We thought about, like Mike joked about all the stuff that we do that nobody cares about, which is true other than other academics. Said, is there something we could do that might matter, like entrepreneurs might care about? And we hear a lot about how stressful being an entrepreneur is, how much hard work it is, right? And it's obviously validated. There's lots of research that talks about, entrepreneurs with, higher incidence of mental health conditions, depression, just exhaustion. We did a survey, Pacific Northwest, sample of a number of entrepreneurs up in the Pacific Northwest. They average 60 hours of work a week, and nearly a quarter work over 70 hours a week. And there were lots of, one-offs in that study, outliers that work in 80, 90 hours a week. So entrepreneurship is hard, it's difficult. So we said, okay, well, what can we do to help that? Like, are there things that entrepreneurs can do that might help combat high levels of stress and exhaustion? So, there are a lot of ways that we all deal with exhaustion, right? I mean, you could sleep. Sleep is a great remedy for exhaustion, right? But there's a lot of other things people do, like caffeine, tobacco, physical exercise, PT session, all the Air Force bike test, right? You guys remember the bike? Yeah, glad we got rid of the bike test. I'm a runner. I didn't like the bike test. Anyway, so, and then there was this one other thing that we read about. We didn't think about this ahead of time. Like, we had known about all these other things ahead of time, sleep, caffeine, whatnot, but mindfulness. And mindfulness has become much more prevalent, like, in our culture. You see, you can just Google mindfulness and all these, associations, hits come up about it. So when we started reading about it, mindfulness has actually been around as a way to treat a number of things in mental health and psychology for a while. So, because there's lots of definitions of mindfulness, what do I mean by that? Mindfulness is a state of consciousness that's non-judgmental. So it's being aware without being judgmental. So what do I mean by that? I mean, it's a state of consciousness where you're aware of how you feel at the current moment, but you don't judge it, okay? So for example, if I'm working on a presentation, like this is a really important presentation I gotta give, and my boss comes in, and everyone in the office does not really respect the boss. The boss is not the best leader, okay? And everybody sort of knows that. My boss comes in and says, Chuck, look, man, that thing that happened last week, really not, that wasn't your best hour, even though I know it was mostly his fault, right? He did a bad job. But now say, and look, this presentation, I really need you to do a good job on this afternoon. Okay, so let's not drop the ball. And he does that in front of my coworkers, right? And then he leaves. Okay. Now, how am I going to feel after that kind of interaction? I mean, I'm going to feel a lot of things, right? Maybe a little bit of anger, like, look, you're blaming me for things that were your fault. Maybe a little bit of shame, right? Because look, I hold myself to a high standard. I work hard. I take pride in what I do. I knock things out, and maybe it wasn't good enough. Maybe I feel all these things. Okay. If you're mindful, what you do is you say, okay, how do I feel right now? I'm feeling kind of bad, and I don't beat myself up about that, because in today's world, with all the things, how busy everybody is, we're constantly running. We're trying to say, look, don't worry about that, move on to this. But every time we say that, we start beating ourselves up for, well, you shouldn't be worrying about that. Why are you worrying about that? You start to ruminate on it. When you're trying to say, don't worry about that, you still are worried about that. With mindfulness, you say, look, I feel bad right now. Why do I feel bad? Well, I feel bad because my boss came in and he got on me for something that's not my fault. So it's pretty natural that I feel bad. That's okay. In fact, good job, Chuck. You noticed you're feeling bad. And that's it. And then I say, but just because I feel bad right now, that doesn't need to affect the rest of my workday. I noticed I'm feeling bad. That's fine, but let's leave it. Let's get on to this presentation. Okay. Now, that's mindfulness. In practice, is this easy to do? Not without a little bit of practice. It does take, like, look, you've got to practice. Okay, I'm going to be mindful. I'm going to work on this, setting things aside to focus on what I need to focus on. Okay. And that's why often you see mindfulness wrapped up in meditation exercises. A lot of folks that practice meditation tend to be pretty good at mindfulness. Okay. So we did a study. We put all these things in. We said, all right, let's study all that physical, what helps people to feel less exhausted? Sleep, physical exercise, caffeine, tobacco, lots of things, and mindfulness. Wash that all through all the statistics. What came out? It was sleep, not surprising, and mindfulness. The two things that mattered most for reducing entrepreneurs' exhaustion were these. And even more importantly, the real takeaway is that mindfulness helps compensate for low sleep. So in the study, obviously, some entrepreneurs compensated with those that were less exhausted slept more. And, we're like, well, that's going to be great. Like, we're going to go out and tell people, you should sleep more, and you're like, look, man, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm tired. I'm tired because I got to work. I would sleep if I could, but I can't. We also found, though, the folks that were sleeping less, so less than 5 hours a night, the ones that practice high mindfulness were showing significantly less exhaustion than the ones that weren't. When you run it through the data, we found out that basically 10 minutes of mindfulness a day compensate for up to as much as 45 minutes a night. So we're like, okay, that's interesting. Now, the takeaway is you can't replace sleep with mindfulness. There's a lot of physiological benefits to sleep. But for a relatively low intervention, this can have an effect. This can help you feel more productive, less tired. Right? So we did a quick experiment with students, because we teach, so we can do that. So we said a lot of mindfulness training programs, because like I said, this has been used in psychology to treat a lot of things like addictions, overeating, other things. They use mindfulness, and a lot of those training programs, 6 to 8 weeks, they're long programs. They'll like a couple hours on a certain day during the week, and then a whole all day Saturday. I do that for 6 to 8 weeks, and we're like, well, that's going to meet a lot of resistance when we talk to people. They're like, I don't have time to practice mindfulness for that much. We said, okay, let's do 10 minutes a day for 5 days. We had our students practice 10 minutes a day for 5 days. That's it. And lots of different exercises. I can talk about it. What we found out was the students who did this showed 15% less exhaustion, 15% reduction. So even with just a little bit of practice, you can get significant benefits out of mindfulness. And I got to tell you the one story. So one of the exercises we had them do, little 3-minute breathing exercise, real simple. I just turned the lights down in the classroom. I said, okay, a little guided breathing exercise. We're going to put everything away. You're going to turn your phones off. We're going to practice just breathing and focusing on how you feel, breathing, etc. We do that for just 3 minutes, right at the end of class. Turn the lights back up. Everybody left. One of the girls in my class came up and talked to me. She said, Professor, I was wearing one of those Fitbit monitors. I got to tell you, my heart rate in these 3 minutes dropped 20 beats a minute. And I was like, wow. I mean, when we started this, I'm like, this is going to be hokey. There's no way this is going to work. But I was like, wow, that's impressive. So, one of the other things we thought was interesting about this, most of the folks, the entrepreneurs in our sample, weren't doing mindfulness. A lot of them were practicing things like physical exercise. A lot used caffeine, but only a third were doing some type of mindfulness. And mindfulness, covered a lot of different activities. Some did meditation, some did yoga, some engaged in prayer, all had similar effects, but pretty powerful from what we thought. At least, something to help you get through the day. Okay, one other thing I'm going to talk about, my passion is passion. The whole reason that I got into this, thing that I studied right from my dissertation on entrepreneurship, studying passion. Everybody talks about it. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs talk about got to have passion, right? You've heard that over and over again. Got to have passion, okay? What is passion? Passion is a strong emotional motivation, generally tied to your identity. Okay, that's how we define passion. That's what makes it more than an interest, right? If I'm passionate about basketball, I say I'm a basketball player. I don't say I play basketball. If I'm passionate about entrepreneurship, or inventing things, I don't say I invent things. I'm an inventor. I'm an entrepreneur. That kind of separates passion from something you're just interested in. One of the things we know, kind of like when we talk about differences in ADHD, we know there are different types of passion. You have harmonious passions, which are passions you love to do, but you can step away from when it's the right time. So love running my business. I love it, but my daughter has a soccer game. I can walk away from the business to go watch soccer and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. That's harmonious. It integrates harmoniously with the rest of your life, okay? Versus obsessive passions. Obsessive passions, you can't step away. You're just too compelled for any number of reasons. You love it too much, or you feel like if I don't do this, people won't like me, people won't respect me, people won't whatever, okay? I'm still passionate about it, but I don't feel like I can leave it. Here, I can't leave. Daughter's got a soccer game, too bad, honey, I'll see it tonight, okay? Or, honey, I'm at the soccer game, but the whole time I'm there, I'm not focused on her. It's like, I shouldn't be away from the business. I shouldn't be away from the business. I'm a bad entrepreneur. Okay, those are the two different types. So we thought, okay, a lot of research basically says harmonious passions lead to functional outcomes in life. This is fine. Obsessive passion is fine for surging when I've got to do certain things, but over the long term tends to lead to a lot of dysfunctional things, relationship conflict, burnout, a lot of other things, okay? And, my favorite example of obsessive passion, like how many athletes do you see? You've read stories, obsessively passionate, right? And one of my favorites, like I read stories about Kobe Bryant, rest in his soul. Kobe, he would talk about Phil Jackson would be driving into a Lakers practice at, ready at 8 in the morning, and he sees Kobe asleep in his car in the parking lot. He's like, Kobe, what are you doing? It's like, well, I was here from 5 to 7 working out. I had my own practice. Now I'm taking a nap before our practice starts. And then practice starts, and his own teammates say, practice over. Kobe's like, no, you're not leaving. We're playing. We're still playing. We're going to keep going. Okay, that's obsessive. Now, the interesting thing, when I read those things, you think about, okay, so how does obsessive or harmonious passion affect others? We're talking about interacting with your employees, right? How does the type of passion you have, does that have different effects to different types of people? So we thought about, okay, what about employees versus investors? Do they care what type of passion you have? Would an employee respond more to if you're harmonious or obsessive? Think about your career. Think about your military career. Do you ever work for a boss who at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, they're not sending you emails. They're like, look, we got work to do. Let's go. We're calling meetings. We got stuff to do. Or at 7 o'clock at night, you're ready to walk out, boss's light's still on. They're still working. How does that make you feel? How does that affect the office? That's kind of what we were thinking, we were wondering, do employees want to work when they see someone that's super driven? They're like, look, I want purpose. Like Mike was saying, I want purpose. I love an entrepreneur who's driven, but is that too much? Is that going to impact me as an employee? It's going to start impacting my freedoms, the way I interact. Is that bad? And we flip that around to investors. Do investors want the entrepreneur who says, you know what, 5 o'clock at the end of the day, I love this business, but I can go home. I'm going to go home, take care of my daughter. You're already shaking your head. You're like, no. Investors are like, I want you sleeping on the couch, man. That's not fair. We've had a lot of interviews with VCs and angels, and they want commitment. They understand sleeping on the couch is not sustainable. So they're not looking for you to burn the rest of your life, but they definitely want commitment. They don't want this sort of look, I'll engage or disengage depending on how I feel like it. And sure enough, that's what we found. We've run a couple pilot tests. Prospective employees, very much like a passionate boss, but one who's willing to disengage. Investors, they want the committed one. They want the obsessive one. So I'll just get to the data. We ran a couple online pilots. So this is actually new data. You get the first ones that have ever seen it. What we saw from people we said, okay, look, imagine that this is an entrepreneur and you're looking for a job. Do you want to work for this individual? We painted some as harmonious, some as obsessive. We found out by about 20%, employees prefer harmoniously passionate entrepreneurs versus obsessive ones. We don't want to see that obsessive side. That's a turnoff to us when we're looking for a new boss. Conversely, investors want an obsessive entrepreneur. Said about a 40% difference in the amount they were willing to invest. So this was crowdfunding. And then the difference becomes even bigger when you talk about experienced investors. We talk about, okay, individuals who you've done crowdfunding before. Now let's give you a couple different scenarios. Which one do you prefer? Who would you invest more in? Pretty much, statistically significantly obsessive. They want obsessive. What does that mean? Takeaway is, depends on your audience. What type of passion is better? Does that mean you need to be a chameleon? Do you need to switch? Absolutely not. You should never be inauthentic. You need to be who you are. Okay. Employees, investors, they can see that. They want to see the authentic you. What it does mean, though, is you should think about how you present yourself when you're presenting to investors, when you're talking to employees, or if you're the super obsessive type, should you maybe be the one that's doing the initial employee interview? Should you be the one that, modulate, think about how you are and how that's going to affect others. At least be mindful of that. Okay, so I've probably taken up way more time than I should have.
Go right ahead, Chuck.
Mike can answer the first one. Well, they don't. They won't know initially, but depending on what type of investment you're doing. So VCs and angels, due diligence. Through due diligence, they're probably going to get a general sense of how you are. They're going to find out, because in due diligence, they'll talk to employees, they'll talk to your co-founders, they'll talk to people that either know you, as they talk to references and whatnot. They'll get a general sense of how much you work, how much you love it, and specifically what you love. I mean, one of the interesting things that, Mike and I have done a fair amount of VC and angel research. They'll look at what do you love being an entrepreneur, or do you love solving a problem? So they'll be looking at for those things. Because you got to remember, most VCs and angels, especially angels, they're former entrepreneurs. So they have a sense of what you're going through. They'll get a sense of what it is through repeated interactions with you. Yeah, they won't, some do, some are thinking about doing personality studies and whatnot, but most don't go that level. They won't be handing out these scales, that's for sure. But the interesting thing is they do ask us. It's funny, every time we present it to VCs, they're always interested in what's more cutting edge. They're very smart individuals. And if you can give them something that gives them a leg up on how to invest and whatnot, they'll look at that. I'm going off on a tangent. I can talk about research.
Thanks, Chuck. So the nerds have spoken. And now, what we want to do with the time we have remaining is offer it to all of you to ask any questions you may have. I think I'm supposed to say, if you do have a question, there's some microphones around. We are live streaming this as well. So the only way that the question is going to get to the virtual audience is if you use one of the mics. So, and it looks like somebody's already figured that out and has teed themselves up right over there. So hit us.
Thanks, Doctor. How did you operationalize exhaustion?
Oh, very academic question. That's good.
Yeah, so simply we asked them, we gave them a scale. There's a number of scales. And this one was a scale that's been used in a lot of psychology studies, just different measures of look, on scales of 1 to 7, how exhausted, how tired, how I'm too tired to work. I feel, at the end of the day, I feel used up, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I had a question about the Great Resignation. I guess in my life, I've been the Army brat, I've been the soldier, and now I'm the military spouse. And out of all of those roles, being a spouse sucks the worst when it comes down to the job market. And so in those numbers of the Great Resignation, how many of that percentage, we know it's a great percentage of women because we are traditionally the primary caregivers, but out of all of that, how is that also does that number even think about the military spouse who?
I don't even think we know yet. So what she just highlighted, I think, is a very, it's an important data point and a much less understood and underappreciated issue in this country, particularly as it relates to the volunteer force. Rosie, who's back in the back, and myself and others have done a good amount of work now over 10 years on the situation of military spouses. Military spouses, on average, compared to their non-military spouse counterparts, are higher educated. They have more global experiences. I mean, there's a whole list of things I can rattle off, but they're also unemployed at a rate 20+% higher than their 30% higher. There you go. I'm looking at Rosie, but and as far as wages, same thing. For the same job, significantly less. There are things that contribute to that. Frequent moves every 3 years. You get resumes that you have to explain why it is that you didn't hold a job for a period of time. But it is a significant challenge in this country that I think is really underappreciated by policymakers. That said, to your specific question, this is, this what I described, this now Great Resignation, they're calling it, this is unfolded just over the course of the last 7-8 months. That's why, to me, it's fascinating, because I don't know that we know where it's going. And certainly we don't have sort of the fidelity, if you will, in the data to understand military spouses. Rosie, let me ask you, while you're sitting back there, because you follow it, when we look at the employment situation of military spouses, has there been a significant change in the data over the course of the last 6 to 8 months?
Yeah, so it's really hard to gauge the unemployment situation for military spouses in the current climate. So we have to rely on pulses and things. But what the information we have collected, we have found, yes, a huge Great Resignation within military spouses, because not only are they highly unemployed, they make less, but guess what? They have to stay home. COVID changed a lot of it, and it just wasn't worth it. So you're seeing people leaving the labor force just at all. I mean, just generally, and in particular in the past 6 months. And so this has impacted females more than males, and a good portion of military spouses are females. So yeah, I have a lot of data points. Also, Stephanie back here also has data points as well as I don't know if you have.
Bring it on.
Bring it on. Oh, okay, here she comes. Earlier this year, we launched the very first U.S. Military Spouse Chamber of Commerce for the purpose of gathering this data, tracking the challenges and opportunities, and launching the first military spouse-owned enterprise certification based on industry standard. From those businesses, we now have over almost 700 members in a short period of time. We are tracking not just their growth, but who they're hiring, right? And are they focused on B2C, B2G, B2B, and opening up those opportunities for military spouses. Mike, as you mentioned, we have higher levels of education. We're paid less, and oftentimes that gap increases. The higher educated we are, the gap increases, as you know, in income. So what we have found, because we did a pre and post COVID for military spouse entrepreneurs, what we're finding is that spouses were turning to entrepreneurship, self-employment, and remote work at a very high percentage, 48% on average, were either entrepreneurs or interested in entrepreneurship. We're seeing that number increase. So really, one of the key ways you can support military spouses, and we know we're integral to retention, mission readiness, financial stability for families, is by supporting, seeking out, finding, and contracting and doing business with military spouse business owners. I'm Stephanie Brown, by the way, CEO and founder of the Rosie Network, BWise graduate, hoorah, and also the CEO of, got to put that plug in, and the CEO and founder of the U.S. Military Spouse Chamber of Commerce. So
Thank you. Thank you
find
for that.
me if you would like any more information on ways that you can work and support our military spouse business owners. Thank you.
Yep. We'll go down there.
Two quick questions. First, are we gonna get a copy of this?
Yes, well, everything throughout the week, our sort of model for all our programs is you'll have access to all the presentations that they're given this week, even if you don't attend the sessions.
Okay.
So yes.
And the other thing too is this is really good information, and I'm curious on longevity and sustainability for a veteran. Because basically he went back in the workforce, right? So no,
This
not you,
one? Me?
yeah. But so as an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years, and it seems to me like every 3 or 4 years, I get a new idea, I bring it to market, it does well, get out, go do something different, right?
You
So-
probably have ADHD too.
So
Yeah.
from longevity and sustainability standpoint, is there any data at all? On that?
I mean, I think one of the things we know and have known for a long time is service members, military connected individuals, including military spouses, have historically been over-indexed to business ownership in this country. If you look at the data going all the way back to World War II, as a percentage of the population, last time I looked, and it was about 5-6% of the population, but about 12, 13, 14% of all business owners in this country are military connected, but only about 5. And that was, I think there's a astounding statistic after World War II that I think within 7 years of the end of the war, somewhere, I think it was 54% of the 12.8 million folks that came back from World War II had launched a small business in this country. I mean, astounding. And historically, the presentation that John gave really mirrors a presentation and work that I've done, about all of you. There's a classic definition of entrepreneurship that an economics definition of entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity in the face of inherently constrained resources. And if you think about your military service experience, that's what it was about, right? It's this idea of figuring out how to get the mission done, most often without the resources that you need to pull that off. It's, somebody didn't come into your office and say, hey, this is important, this matters. Chuck, I need you to take this on. And by the way, if you need me to add people to your team, I'll give you all the people you need. And if you need more money, and by the way, if you need more time, just take all the time you need to get this thing done. You never heard that. You heard exactly the opposite. You heard, Chuck, you got to take this on. And guess what? I can't give you any more people, can't give you, and you got 48 hours to figure it out. I don't think we realize as military connected individuals just how much that service experience prepared you for entrepreneurship. I think that in part is why throughout history, there has been this over-indexing of folks that, there's all kinds of other reasons. So you're tired of being told what to do, when to go to the dentist, when to go, all of it. Autonomy, that's part of what comes with entrepreneurship and business ownership. But I also think it's that you've learned and acquired a set of skills and abilities, the ability to be, I think it was John talked about failure. Entrepreneurship is defined by failure, not the big catastrophic. Sometimes those happen too, but the number of times just people will tell you no. Right? And many people can't move beyond that. They can't overcome being told no once or twice or 3 times. But it's something that as a consequence of your military service experience, again, whether you're a spouse or a veteran, you just move on. Okay, what's next? Let's go do it. So I think there are a lot of those, to the question. I think we underappreciate just how much military service and that experience of being part of a military connected community actually aligns with the knowledge, skills, abilities, attributes that you need to be successful. And that comes out in the data. I keep looking at Rosie. She's, you look at the 5-year survival rate of businesses started by military connected individuals versus others, it's significantly higher, significantly more likely to make it to 5. And 5 years is like the magic number in business ownership. Make it to 5, likely to make it to 20, but most don't make it to 5. But you're more likely to make it to 5 in part because of that military service experience.
This is a really terrific presentation. Bill Kapfer, Global Head of Supplier Diversity at JP Morgan Chase. Research supports the facts that entrepreneurs of color have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. What have you folks seen around entrepreneurs of color, and more importantly, veteran entrepreneurs of color? And it could be about the passion or the ADHD or the venture creation. What have you research shown?
I almost want to get Rosie to answer this question, because I know we've done multiple data calls on the community throughout COVID, specifically focused on that particular question. So Rosie, I can find a chair for you. You can join me up here if you want.
So actually on our website, we do have data breaks, Black veteran business owners and women veteran business owners, and I'm working on a Hispanic one now. But some of the things that we found, and I don't know about ADHD or passion, so I'd love for you guys to follow up on that. But we found that there was an access to capital challenge is significantly higher compared to their white, non-Hispanic counterpart. We found awareness, we have all these awareness of resources and we know that they're there, but there is a lack of awareness of being utilized in particular. And I have a lot of data points, happy to share them. Happy to also share them along with the slide deck for those that are interested. I don't know.
I just want to say thank you, Rose. I just returned the day before yesterday from the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
And I feel that could be a point that there's some intersectionality there, and to have you show up, particularly the Hispanic veterans.
Absolutely. And one of our goals, especially, so we're doing a national survey of military affiliated entrepreneurs. And one of the goals is obviously to collect so we can understand, but ultimately turn around and provide relevant, on-point, current insights, in particular with, Hispanics, female, Latinas, all of that. And so there are differences, there's commonalities, but ultimately there are differences across, and our goal is to understand and help better to support. So again, happy to share any sort of insights, data points, and anything to that.
Forbes recently put out an article talking about how within 5 to 10 years, 70 to 75% of the workforce is going to be remote or contractors. And when you have a contractor who essentially is buying into multiple companies and dealing with multiple business owners, what advice do you give to the business owner to help that contractor buy in so you're not constantly having to find another contractor to replace the one that might be leaving?
Yeah, it's a good question.
So you're talking about you're using an independent contractor as opposed to an employee, and that's the way it's going to be? Yeah.
So
That's a good question. I'm thinking.
So
I was avoiding my impulsivity.
Yeah.
And just telling you.
I was too. That's why I looked at these guys. So I will say this, the flip side of this. So I'm going to try to turn that question and my earlier presentation into an opportunity. What everybody understands basic economic model of a business, fixed cost, variable cost, right? Fixed costs are a challenge because whether you're generating revenue or not, you got to cover fixed costs. What's your biggest fixed cost? More likely than not, it's employees, it's salary. So there is an opportunity embedded in the Great Resignation, and that is the opportunity to bring on transactional employees. The idea that you can go out into the marketplace, identify specialized skills. Maybe you don't need the full-time accountant on staff, but you can go out and bring that experience, that talent to your business in a way where you're not carrying that full cost of a salary, but instead, but at the same time, you are bringing the experience and the skill you need to accomplish some discrete task, whether it's a creative task, an engineering task,